Please welcome Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Energy Installations and Environment, Dennis McGinn.
How did you like that green tie that Ray Mabus was wearing? I mean, what a guy. Secretary Mabus, my boss, just did a wonderful job in basically telling you what we are doing and why we are doing it. And I just want to put a context around what we are doing in the Department of the Navy for our Navy and Marine Corps with our Navy and Marine Corps, and maybe give you some thoughts about how our federal government, in partnership across the board with public and private entities, can really sustain this. Our energy security, our environmental security, our economic security are all inextricably linked. You can't really do anything big in any one of those without having some effect, positive or negative, in the others. And when you think about economy, environment, and energy, those are all key aspects that underlie our very national and international security. So when we think about what we are going to do with our energy portfolio along the lines that Secretary Mabus described, we have to think in that broader context. We talk about technology. Secretary Mabus mentioned some biofuels, solar power, microgrids, storage. Those are good ways to start conversations about changing our energy portfolio in a way that has positive economic and environmental outcomes, as well as directly contributing to our warfighting capability and our role in national defense. But technology discussions get you started. You need a couple of other things. One, of course, is culture. And we in the Department of the Navy, with our sailors, Marines, and great civilian workforce, have completely changed the conversation about energy and its role in our very, very central mission. That culture is captured by the Marine Corps' Energy Ethos program, or the Energy Warrior program for our sailors in the United States Navy. So technology and culture, two-thirds of the way there. The final part, and this is something that is really, really key to this conference, is partnerships. Secretary Mabus mentioned partnership with Tom Vilsack over at the USDA, Secretary Moniz over at DOE, Gina McCarthy at EPA. We work across Sally Jewell at Interior with Fish and Wildlife and National Park Service. We work across those partnerships at the federal level. But importantly, we don't have too many big Navy bases here right in Washington or inside the Beltway. You have some, they're great, but it's the communities and the states in which these large installations lie. They have really, really made a lot of great progress. We have a strategic partnership with the state of Hawaii, given the tremendous presence of Navy and Marine Corps, as well as Army and Air Force in that great state. In June, I signed with Governor Ige a memorandum of agreement that is going to help us achieve our energy and environmental outcomes, as well as the state achieving their 100% renewable goal by 2045. We have an event in California on the 12th of October at Stanford University, in which I'm going to do the same thing with Governor Brown to memorialize the more than 3 years of strategic partnership that we have had with the state of California, because we've got 14 major installations, Navy and Marine Corps, in that state. One of the examples that came from that was mentioned by Secretary Mabus, the WAPA as a partner, Western Area Power Authority, 150 megawatts of solar power from a site called Mesquite 3 in Arizona will soon be shipped to meet 1/3 of the total requirement for energy at our Navy and Marine Corps bases in California. Huge advances. And oh, by the way, we're getting it for much cheaper than what we would be paying for brown power. Those are real business case facts. Which leads me to another key takeaway I'd like you to think about. A lot of folks say, what's going to happen after the president leaves office, Ray Mabus goes away. What's going to happen to this momentum? My answer is nothing. It will probably accelerate because it is all about good business for the United States of America. Remember, economy, energy, environment, inextricably linked. So the voices of the new value chains that we have created around energy efficiency and renewable energy and microgrids and biofuels, those value chains powered by the business community are what will keep this momentum going forward. And I'm really, really happy to see what we have been able to do in our time, but I am really excited to see this momentum continue and to really get down through partnerships across the federal government, with states, communities, and especially with the private sector. And we have had a great deal of success in dealing with the private sector, whether they're utilities that provide us our primary gas and electricity on our bases, or whether it's the private sector that are developing energy projects, that are doing energy savings performance contracts. All of these relationships and partnerships go right down to Main Street in every community in which there is any type of Department of Defense presence, and that will sustain us going forward. People see the value. We are starting to take the politics out of energy and environment, and putting the business in where it should have been all along. So I think going forward, we can all, through our own efforts, and believe me, we all have an evangelical role to play here in that we've got to carry this message of the business case for sustainability, the business case for renewable energy, the business case for energy efficiency, and all of this shift, this tectonic shift from a fossil fuel economy to clean energy economy bodes very, very well for, well, I would say, keeping America great for a long, long time. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Thank you. Oh, this one's too hard. Microgrids. You mentioned microgrids. This is the same thing more cities and communities are exploring. How is or can the Navy and other branches bring their learning and best practices on microgrids and renewable to communities throughout the country? I think primarily in the deals that we are doing with the private sector, with the business community, in actually designing and building and deploying those microgrids, and also not just from a technical standpoint, but the business way, using third-party finance that we can use to get those microgrids actually deployed. We are doing a big project up in Naval Sub Base New London, Connecticut, in which the state of Connecticut, the city of Groton, which is right adjacent to our sub base, are doing a huge microgrid project, and that will provide power not just to the base but to the community under a banner that we call regional resiliency. It's not enough that our installations are going to be more resilient. That's important, but it's important also that our communities are resilient because we are true partners, and we want to make sure that we work together to do the right things. And, oh, by the way, I would say that on balance, the Navy so far, the Department of the Navy, has learned more from the private sector about microgrids than the reverse is so. But as we get better at it, as we deploy more, we'll be absolutely sharing that through our partnerships with the private sector. Another question here. Can you share effort at the Navy to make our coast bases resilient to extreme weather and climate change? I think if this climate change and sea level rise stuff turns out to be really true, more than 70% of the ocean is going to be covered by water, so we're going to need a bigger Navy. Next question. No, we are taking very seriously. There's been a terrific amount of partnership in the communities. Hampton Roads down in southeastern Virginia is a perfect example of that, where we are looking at our infrastructure and we are looking at the community's infrastructure, and we're saying what has to be done. For example, We're not talking about, oh gosh, in 2100 the seas could be a foot higher or 2 feet higher or whatever. Okay, that's a concern. But we're not going to find the political will or the resources to start building dikes today to be able to be prepared for that contingency. But what we need to do is say, guess what? There could be a Category 3 hurricane that comes through Cape Charles and Cape Henry this hurricane season or next year or within the next five or 10 years that would inundate through surge tides and coastal flooding are key assets for our military installations and our communities. So if we have substations that are from our power provider that are going to be flooded under the right conditions of a Category 2 or 3 hurricane, we need to be doing stuff about that today, and we are. When we build buildings, we are thinking, what goes in the basement? Don't put the servers there. Not a good idea if you're in a FEMA floodplain. Will our backup power systems really work, not just on a sunny day when you're testing it every 30 days, but will they work when the wind is blowing and the water's rising in the darkness, really making sure that the systems for backup are robust. And of course, our partnership, once again, in terms of emergency response are absolutely critical. Any other questions? Hey, that's great. I am off to Albuquerque, New Mexico to Sandia National Lab. I'm going to be meeting there with Deputy Secretary of Energy and her team and the private sector, all of the utilities, rural electric co-ops, municipals, and investor-owned, to talk about grid resiliency. And I want to make the point that we, in the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy, want to be part of the solution going forward to make more resilient grids, to partner, to put assets where it makes sense to do so from an engineering or financial standpoint on our installations, because that will not only increase our mission resiliency, it will increase that critical partnership and that critical community resiliency. Thanks a lot and have a great rest of the afternoon.